Okay. Well, good afternoon. It seems to be slowing down slightly, so anyone joining will come in just after the start here. But good afternoon. My name's Adam Mordaunt. I'm the Director of Member Services here at Ontario One Call, and I also oversee the dedicated locator team here as well. I'll be presenting the webinar today. Marco's lucky enough to be sunning himself down south at the moment, so hopefully he's having a good time rather than getting wet with the storms that are passing through. But I'll be taking you through a bit of an update on dedicated locator, where we are in the industry and out there right now in terms of requests and what's happening. And then we've also got Ron Laidman here from Inertia, who'll be giving us a presentation about the dedicated locator best practices from his point of view as in the industry. So let's get started with having an update of what projects are currently happening out there right now. It's very similar to what we've seen over the last month or so. This is something that we're not really seeing a huge amount of movement in terms of new projects coming on board. It's not surprising to us, really. This is the period of the time of the year where the peak season is starting to taper off a little bit, but everyone's trying to make sure that they get what they can in before the ground gets a little bit chilly there and freezes over. So now what we're expecting is over the next month or two for people to start communicating with us about their projects for 2024. And certainly if anyone on this call is looking to use dedicated locator for 2024, please do reach out to the dedicated locator team in the next couple of months, and we can help you with any questions and helping you set yourselves up for success going forward. So this list hasn't really changed much. The imminent list, there is internet solutions that has been added, and we may see them come online soon. And that's probably the one that has seen the most movement, along with YorkNet, may also be happening in the near future. In terms of the upcoming projects, again, we're looking at more for next year and looking to have those conversations over the coming months. So we last month you would have seen the numbers for June had quite a dip. There were a couple of number of reasons that we were informed about. Some projects had cutbacks, and there was some areas that were supposed to have some works didn't end up coming to fruition this year. So there was a bit of a dip there that we saw, but certainly we saw July there was a bit of a bounce back, which is the opposite of what we actually saw last year. So we believe that we're going to continue to see this increase over the coming months, and then the usual taper off towards the end of the year as we see a lot of the construction projects with the frozen grounds, construction projects do tend to stop over that period. It will be interesting to see how that happens over the November, December, January of next year, because what we saw last year, even though there's a taper off at the end of the year, it was much shallower in terms of the percentage in reduction comparatively to those public stream locate requests. So we're seeing dedicated locator is more 12 monthly as opposed to, seasonally like the public load. So we're expecting that to happen, and we had said a couple months ago that we expect that the year-to-date value would surpass the 100,000, if only slightly. But with that dip in June, I think it's unlikely for that to happen. But certainly in the next 5 months, I think we're going to creep up to the area of 100,000 locate requests through dedicated locator, which is a substantial amount considering where we're at with dedicated locator right now. We are still trying to build upon this and facilitate getting those project owners who wish to use dedicated locator into the industry and being able to use it. And certainly there have been some issues with some project owners being able to use dedicated locator, and we know about that. And certainly we are trying to work hard. So heading into next year, into 2024, hopefully we will have the industry set up in a more appropriate way. Hopefully the industry understands dedicated locator a little bit better, and hopefully everyone's set up more appropriately from all angles to be able to step in to use dedicated locator. In terms of where the works are happening, this has been fairly standard throughout the year in the different regions. The one thing that we can take from this is it really is across the province. Obviously, it's in certain areas more predominantly than others, but certainly we do see it across the province. And that is showing that dedicated locator has been of a benefit to project owners across the board. And then when we look at where or who is doing the work, obviously Bell, having been using dedicated locator prior to it being put into the one call legislation, they've dominated the use of dedicated locator. They were really set up to continue on with mass usage of it, and they do have 2/3 of the notifications going through our system. But certainly we're seeing Rogers using the system more and more by the week. But we can continue to see that the fiber companies, they are the ones that are dominating the use of dedicated locator. Is obviously a very competitive industry, and this gives a competitive edge by controlling those locates. So certainly the fiber industry is really still using dedicated locator, but we are having more and more conversations with the other sectors that are interested to get into dedicated locator in the coming year. And then obviously one of the vital parts to allowing or enabling people to get in to be able to use dedicated locator is who are the active DLSPs. So the list hasn't really changed here over the last couple of months, but it doesn't mean that we haven't been doing work in the background. And Ontario One Call and our stakeholders have been working hard together to try and bring in more LSPs to be available to be used as a DLSP. And certainly we're expecting Tierra, if not today, in the next week or so, to become a DLSP, an active DLSP, and moving across to the left-hand column. And certainly Leadcore in TransCanada Utilities, CCS, Superior, Lawson, and Utility Marks that are there as close. They really are all very close. And they're just taking those final steps in terms of trainings or getting the appropriate contracts or agreements in place. So there are a number of LSPs that are on the verge, and certainly we continue to work very closely with our partners out there to try and move them into that left-hand column, which will assist everyone in the industry in terms of the usage of dedicated locator. So just to give you an update of a few things here at Ontario One Call that have changed recently, our website has received a refresh. You may have seen some communications about it. You may have even seen the changes on the website itself. If you haven't, I do encourage you to go and have a look. The new website has been designed so it should have an easier way to navigate through to find the information you want, the DL policy, for example, or as you see on the right-hand side, this interactive map. So if you want to know what dedicated locator zone you will be working in or region you'll be working in, you can put the city or municipality in there, click the Find Zone button. It will take you down and it will let you know which DL zone that you're working in. This is a really useful tool. A lot of people ask us which zones they're in. This tool will really help you with things like that. If there are things that you would like to see on there, or maybe some finessing or slight changes, then do give us that feedback. We're very open to that feedback. We're trying to make it so that it's easier and more beneficial to all of our stakeholders to use our website, a real resource base for everyone. And if you have a few minutes, there is a video on there. It's the latest advert for dedicated locator. And certainly if you have that, we're going to start sharing it via social media. And I'm sure Marcom will be happy to talk to you if you'll be happy to share it on your end to help with getting dedicated locator out there if you want to show your support for dedicated locator. And then a couple of things that are either upcoming or have just been launched. So September 21st is an important date for us. The annual and special members meeting will be happening. If you wish to attend and haven't received a communication about that, or if you want to find out more information or have questions, please do reach out to digsafely@ontariooncall.ca. There are a couple important votes about the fee associated to the members of owners of underground infrastructure that will be going into next year, and a couple of bylaw changes as well. If you want to see the package of information for that, it is on our website, or again, reach out to that email address. The team will be only too happy to answer those questions and send you the information and tell you where to register for the virtual meeting, or if you want to submit your vote if you're unable to attend on the day. We also do receive proxies in advance by many members, so please reach out and we'll be only too happy to help you with that. And then a couple of days ago, no risk, a new course was released by our training education department. This is a really good course that is basically there to help give a greater understanding of the risky behaviors that are currently happening out there in the industry and how these behaviors can affect not only that person performing those risky behaviors, but also the company that they're working for and others around them. So it's a really good course. If you're interested to learn more about that or plaque, please do reach out to our training education department. They can tell you a little bit more about it and tell you how you're able to sign up to that. You can reach that team at training@ontariooncall.ca. So that's my very quick update on Ontario One Call and what we're seeing in the industry for dedicated locator this month. As I say, there hasn't been a huge amount of movement on the surface. There is an awful lot happening in the background. And again, we are here to answer any questions or have those conversations if anyone wishes to have those conversations with the DL team. So now I'd like to introduce you to Ron Laidman. He is from Inertia, and he's going to give us a presentation about the view of dedicated locator, the best practices from a consultation point of view, which is one of the services that Ron and his team offer over there. So I'm going to hand it over to Ron. I will say, if anyone does have any questions, we do have the Q&A section. Please put them in there, and then we'll get to those at the end of Ron's presentation. So Ron, I will pass it over to you if you'd like to take control of the screen.
I'm going to put my video on too, so you guys can see my lovely mug. Here we go. Can you see that?
So it's I'm still seeing it's on my screen at the moment too.
Yeah.
Okay. There we go. Okay.
There we go. All right. So thank you. It's nice to be here. Like Adam talked about, I'm focused on energy consulting and in general across the utility sector. And one of those areas is with the dedicated locator process with LSPs, with utility owners, contractors, whoever it may be, and helping to navigate this process. I've been in this industry for quite a while through time out west and also back in Ontario, specifically with ProMark and PVS and GTEL and PlanView and other organizations that are quite integral to this whole locate and construction and infrastructure market. I was a former ORCGA board member too, which is quite involved in the training and the processes and the whole industry consultations. And I was part of the Bill 93 and the broadband dedicated locator program kind of committees and stuff that really led to where we're at today too back in the day. So that's who I am. I'm here to kind of speak from that experience and what I've been doing with Inertia the last little while. I want to give a little context on the history of dedicated locator long before One Call got involved, so that everyone understands who wasn't involved back then, where this kind of came from. Talk about the process a little bit from the owner's perspective. Go through some of the response considerations, best practices that I'm seeing out there and that I would recommend, as well as talk about the competency review and that process in the background, so that people understand what's really happening there. And go through a few concerns and impacts as well that are impacting the owners out there, and just talk through some of that, and then just some considerations for being ready to respond to DL requests in the future. So I want to go back to 2016 and even before then, but dedicated locator projects have been going on since that time at least, and probably before. They weren't officially set up in One Call the same way they are today. They were usually done through project owners or major utility owners who wanted to have specific projects done, but they were quite big. Most of Toronto's fiber was put in place through dedicated locate arrangements. Again, it only worked in certain situations back then when you had all the utility owners contracted to one LSP and you could control the project and get things through quickly. When you had multiple LSPs to multiple contracts, multiple utility owners in a certain area, it didn't work in those situations very well because there was nothing compelling the utility owners to really agree to use a certain LSP. So it kind of took away the effectiveness of a program. And it was very manual too, because there was no way within the one call system to separate tickets. And to give a little context, if I bring this forward, even back to 2021, long before one call started reporting and collecting data, I think Adam talked about that from Bell's perspective too, and certain other owners, they've been operating long before this too. But just in the last couple of years, there's been over 7 million, by my estimates, 7 million dedicated locate meters done across the province. So it's a considerable amount of work that's been done up to this point already. And again, a lot of this started before the one call process really got going. So it's not a new process. It's just the framework and the regulations and the rules have changed to address some of the gaps that weren't necessarily working in the process before. And that's kind of how we got to where we are. Is it perfect? No, but it is addressing the gaps that were really holding up previous dedicated locator projects. If you go on OneCall's website, there is a more detailed process flow, and I think most people are probably aware of the process considerations now. But what I want to talk about here is from a member perspective, really where the work begins for you when you need to respond to a DL request or a member authorization request that comes through on your end, and some best practices I'm seeing and considerations you need to have in mind. Again, many of you might have already been through this and you've already been seeing this, but again, it's just a reinforcement for those that haven't, and maybe some new ideas for those that have. Initially, when you get a response or get a request, like set up an introductory call, get to know who the other party is, the scope, the DLSP that they're proposing, understand the competency, contact people, just what you need to do to get that project going. And more than anything, that legal contract is the big thing you need to get in place. It's not required, but as a utility owner, you're going to want to have a contract for liability purposes in place with the DLSP or with the project owner, so that they can have access to mapping, so that there's liability considerations in place if something goes wrong, if there's a damage. This is where, in my experience, it can take months in the process. It's not a quick thing if you're not set up right, or if you don't have the proper contract ready to go, and there's just a lot of back and forth and a lot of legal considerations and costs and time. So that's the biggest thing. Get that in the hands of the LSP and hopefully the project owner too, and then get that going as quickly as possible. And then from there, the mapping is always the thing that takes up the next amount of work. It's the biggest roadblock in the process, ensuring that the LSP and the project owner, if they need to, but the LSP has access to the mapping in a way that makes sense, whether it's through multi-viewer, whether it's through a GIS portal, whether it's through a manual OneDrive, whatever it might be. This can be a pretty big issue, and sometimes it has to wait for the contract to be done. And so there's a lot of steps that go in there that are kind of intertwined. Another thing too, if you can be ready with some specific procedures you have, the LSP is going to be qualified. They're going to know how to do sewer, water, traffic, whatever it may be that you might have as your infrastructure, but they may not have worked in your specific area. So having those specific sketch requirements or specific field access or anything that's special to your specific needs, having those clarified and materials ready to share, it's going to speed up the process and take away a lot of time and noise on your end to get things going. Same with field technical support, having that ready to go, understanding how they're going to escalate something. Normally they'd rely on their experienced locators to be able to support escalations in the field, but if they haven't worked in your area, they might need some technical support to be able to handle things. So having that line ready, having that communication channel ready is key. And then project tracking is another thing too. Get that out of the way from the beginning so that both parties understand what you need to see as a utility owner, whether it's for OEB compliance, whether it's for your own safety visibility, whether it's for your own tracking internally. Whatever it may be, just have that clarity so that you can get that set up while you still have the LSP and the project owner's attention at the beginning. That's pretty vital at that point as well. I do want to go into the competency review process too, and just because there's been a lot of work, as Adam mentioned, on this that's gone in. So if you understand when you get a request, a DL request, what that means when you see a DLSP on there. And now, if you've seen them on the approved list, if you understand that they've been approved by OneCall, and the LAC members, you know that they've already been working here. They've already been vetted. They've already been through a pretty robust process. They've probably got a track record in place. They're probably already contracted to multiple utilities, large utilities, small utilities, whoever it may be in the province. So you can feel pretty assured if they're on that approved list that they're already through that, or they've been through the competency review that many of the LAC members and One Call have been going through. Now, if they aren't previously approved and they come through on this, chances are some of the larger members are going to want to go through the review as well, not just yourself. So that this could hold things up, and it probably will hold things up as you review the DLSP and make sure they meet the competency you need. There is a minimum criteria. There is a guideline that's been developed with many of the members in One Call to assess LSPs around systems and training and safety, insurance, and QA. And competency and QA are really the main focus, and there's a deep dive that gets done in the background with many of the major stakeholders and One Call to ensure that an LSP meets the requirements that you need. So if you're getting a DL request from XYZ Locate company as the DLSP, you can know that they have been through a pretty robust process. Can take months, if not years, depending on what's going on, to ensure that they're gonna be as capable as possible to work on your infrastructure at that point. So that's what's happening in the background. It's a months-long process. There's a detailed review and so much more going into it than what might be shown on the surface. So again, it's if you're getting that approved DLSP coming through, you know they've been through a pretty robust review at that point. I want to go through a few questions, concerns, comments that I've heard come up, whether through these calls or through my own interactions with members and with LSPs and whoever else it may be. The big one is, why can't I just continue using my LSP? Why am I being forced to do this? My response is, why not? You're getting a bunch of tickets that are unbudgeted, unforecasted, complex tickets taken away from your load. It's going to save you time, going to save you cost, save you noise in the future. So with no liability downside. So there's no reason not to from that perspective, other than maybe keeping your internal locators busy, but there's plenty of work out there. This is incremental work that's not really budgeted. So that shouldn't be an issue from keeping your staff, keeping staff busy. Unions, again, I haven't heard of any grievances out there. I don't know why a union would grieve this. We're not taking away work through this. There's no decrease in activity. This is just incremental work that's being handled in a little different way than was originally intended. So I haven't heard of that. If there's any stories, I'd love to hear. Liability, it comes up quite a bit, and that's where that contract with the LSP is very important. Having that direct line from the utility owner to the LSP, and then the LSP is going to be contracted to the project owner. Having that line through the liability is going to be key, and that's going to make sure that you're protected. It's going to make sure that all the parties are connected contractually. Best practice, in my experience, is to have a three-party agreement. So the project owner and the LSP is contracted through a single agreement. That just makes it clearer, makes it cleaner, makes it easier to manage as well. But again, that's something I've seen in certain situations and isn't as common in other situations. So it is out there, but it works pretty well. Visibility, another big one. Just now that the tickets are being siphoned off your load, you don't know what's coming through. You might have compliance, you might have reporting needs, you might have safety concerns, future liability, things like that. That's an easy one to solve with the LSP or the project owner, having that broken off and sent to you and shared with you. That's all part of setting that up right from the get-go with the LSP when you set that up. Who's paying for my added time and costs? There's going to be a lot of upfront costs to get ready for this. Short answer is you are, but it's a small cost and time consideration compared to all the future costs and future time and noise and everything you would have had to deal with in unbudgeted locates and everything else that would have come up in the future had you not done this. So it's a pretty easy calculation of the return that you're going to get from the short-term investment to be able to take all this off your plate and all these costs off your plate in the future. And also dedicated locator. How's it going to solve the late locate issue? It's a tool. It's going to take away one of the biggest challenges that are out there, which is these complex, long duration, really hard to manage tickets that are unforecasted, that are coming and infiltrating the entire public load and just adding to the resourcing issue that's out there. So it allows everybody to plan better. It's a tool to take this off so you can focus as a utility owner on what you really need to do, which is public compliance or your own specific project compliance that you may have. So it's not going to solve things, but it's certainly going to help and should help moving forward. And then competency, again, we talked about that on one of the previous slides, and I can go into that later in more detail. So again, just to reinforce some of the benefits and some of the impacts to the owners, the big one is budget certainty, cost certainty. You're taking these unforecasted tickets off of your load. You're no longer having to pay for them at that point. So it's a win-win for no other reason than just to do that, just to have that certainty and have that budget certainty moving forward, and resourcing certainty. Compliance, again, it's going to be taken out of your public compliance, as you all know. So it's, when future penalties come into place, when you're reporting, when you have other compliance requirements, it's going to be much better having those removed from there. Focus is another big one too. Project owners, contractors, homeowners, everyone, if these are in the public load, it's just complaint central and noise and time taken up from your end. It's just otherwise taking away your ability to provide the actual public locates. So, and then resource planning, again, we talked about that. It's going to help everybody plan better, especially as this gets more implemented, having more resources hired and ramped up across all the LSPs and the contractors and everybody in the industry. It's all going to help towards the late locate issue, theoretically. So let me finish off just providing this. There's a lot going on this slide, but I want to just focus on just reinforce some of the comments I've made through here about how you as a utility owner can prepare and get ready to respond to a DL request, and really like taking a look at your locate processes, understanding the specific needs you have and outlining those and documenting those. It's a big one right there. And understanding the contracts you have in place, where your mapping is, how people get access to it, what documentation you have, what systems you're using. Just taking a look at all that, going through a checklist and just understanding, yep, I've got that covered. This is how I'm going to manage that. Having a plan in place so that you know how you're going to respond, who's taking the lead, who's on the team that's going to have to respond to this from each perspective, whether it's from IT, the project lead, from a technical standpoint. There's just aspects you could be ready for very quickly to have this all clarified. The contract, like I mentioned, is a huge one. It can take months to go through that sometimes. And if you're coming in with your standard supply chain agreement or a standard LSP agreement that you might have with another LSP, it's often filled with a lot of information that's not applicable in this situation because there's no financial relationship going on. There's no specific reporting. There's no compliance scorecards, things like that come into play. So a much more simplified agreement that makes sense for this particular arrangement, for the dedicated arrangement, will make the process go quicker because the LSP will not have to go back and forth, and you will not have to go back and forth and review and have calls, and so it's going to save time and cost if you can have a more dedicated specific agreement ready to go. And same with the mapping transfer. It's I've seen that cause a lot of roadblocks, and it caused a lot of issues in the past where you're trying to figure out how to get access to the mapping, a new system that you can't give access to more than one LSP, or you don't have a way to transfer things properly, either manually or through your GIS system. So having that ready and having that clarified and ready to go, that's again, it's going to save a lot of time and save a lot of headaches moving forward. And then as well, the procedures and the training documents, again, if there's anything special about your utility, anything special about your needs, having those ready and clarified, the LSP is going to know what they're doing. Technically, they're just not going to know specifically maybe something to do with your area in particular. So having that clarified and ready to go, it's going to make the whole handover process go easier. So there's a lot more to consider here in the process, a lot more that I could go into, but I just wanted to talk about more being ready and how to respond at this point. And again, there's a lot more as you get going and things that you could be doing that we could talk about. But again, I'll leave it there. I'm happy to answer any questions, talk about anything, discuss anything, complaints, anything that may be there.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks very much for that, Ron. That was really interesting. That was a great overview. I agree. There's so much to go into this, but I think you covered an awful lot of ground really well there. So thanks very much. We don't have any questions in the Q&A box right now. So if anyone out there does have any questions, please feel free to click on the Q&A and type in your questions, either for Ron's presentation, or if you have any other questions about Dedicated Locator, we can also discuss those at this point as well. I will ask, Ron, so when you're talking to people out there out in the industry, you're talking about, obviously you need to set yourselves up appropriately, and this is a different beast from what people generally have on their day to day. So how well are people, when you start those conversations, how well are they set up currently, or is this something people really need to get ahead of?
I what I found, and again, if I go back to my past life too, and current activities, I found the larger members are usually pretty well. They've already had to face this, so they've prepared for this to a certain degree, maybe not fully, but they're working on. They've got better contracts in place. They've got procedures to share, things like that. So it's the ones that haven't really been faced, the ones that haven't really had to respond. That's where a lot of the I guess a lot of the work I think needs to get done at this point, and understanding and resources are tight out there for folks. So having that understanding about who's going to take lead on that and who's going to, having the right contracts in place. Again, I get back to this contract side of things. It's a huge roadblock for people out there. So I'd say there's a lot of good work that's been done already. It's a lot of good preparation that's been done, but there's a lot more sharing of information, or being ready for planning, understanding what's coming down the pipeline, and making sure that impacted utility owners are aware of what's coming so that they can plan. That's what I'm seeing is not maybe necessarily being done yet.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I liked your comment earlier about the contract. And at the moment, we're looking at quite a simplistic one-to-one contract. And certainly some of the discussion that I have heard starting to come in, and you mentioned about the three-party contract, or the tri-party contract, including so your project owner, your owner of underground infrastructure, and your DLSP. I do think that comment was really great, because it is something that I would encourage everyone on this call to look into a little bit further, because I think that does potentially, and would you agree that it takes out some of the legwork when you're trying to balance multiple contracts or agreements?
I'd say what it does more than anything is it adds reassurance to the utility owner. It may not actually do much in the end, but it adds reassurance and adds clarity on who's responsible for things, and gives more credence to the project coming through. That okay, XYZ utility knows that this larger project owner is involved and is engaged in this too, and they've got a direct line to them as well. So it's not necessary, but it's just a cleaner process in my mind if you can arrange that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And certainly, I think when we're looking at setting up, regardless if you're the project owner or a DLSP, or an owner of underground infrastructure, setting yourself up in advance. And again, going back to one of your comments that I think is really important to reiterate, setting yourself up in advance is really important. I think you don't want to be waiting until you get that notice and then scrambling about. And I think you alluded to the fact that, when we're looking at this, yes, there is an investment of time, and certainly that what comes with that is some financial investment from an owner of underground infrastructure to set themselves up correctly. But the benefits do, I believe, outweigh that initial investment, because this is a uh, long-term project, I guess, if you want to term it as something where a lot of people are interested in dedicated locator. This isn't, I don't believe, a flash in the pan, and I do think that there's going to be more people coming into this over the coming years. And certainly, I think you're right. Setting yourselves up correctly today, even if you don't have a project knocking at your door, I think that's really important, because what would you say is the average length of trying to get set up for something like this as an owner of underground infrastructure looking at this? I know that that's very difficult to answer, because there's so many moving parts involved in this, but we're not talking about weeks or even just a couple of months in some situations. This is quite a long-term investment, right?
Yeah, it depends on what perspective. If you're just responding, it can be a pretty quick process if you got your stuff together. But I think the upside too of all this is if you've got a specific project too, or if you've got something that qualifies as a utility owner as a potential dedicated locate project too, you can get that. If you're ready to go, if you understand the process, you can get that set up and take that and get your project done more efficiently too, as well. So there's a lot of potential offshoots of this too once you understand the process better and can respond and have all your paperwork and all your ducks in a row, and the relationships with the LSPs everyone. Like there's a whole world out there that can be facilitated by getting more engaged in this process and understanding all the moving parts as well. I wasn't fully answering your question, I know, Adam, but it was just more of a.
Yeah, it was a good point, and actually, it kind of prompted me in my mind to think about how the industry is actually transitioning at the moment as well. We've traditionally thought about owners of underground infrastructure are one part of the stakeholder group, and the excavation community are another part, and the LSPs are yet another part to that. But in reality, I think dedicated locator is really highlighting that we, as an industry, we're actually got our, our fillers in many parts of that. Some will be in all three categories or sectors there. As an owner of underground infrastructure, there's a lot of people likely to go into being a project owner here. And there is the overlap, and I think you're really correct in saying that having a better understanding from one side can also help you see it from the other side and help you out in both areas going forward. So I think that's a great point.
Yeah,
So
and I was going to say, well, another point too, like a lot of the contractors are trying to figure out how they can get their own locating resources and get kind of more engaged and more vertically integrated too. And many of those approved DLSPs on your slides were actually contractors who have their own locates integrated into their operations too. So they're not actually doing work for other LSPs. So as you get more and more of those companies and this gets more mature and the approval and the understanding of what competency really means and in the industry, having those contractors able to do it internally eventually and having more LSPs added to things too, it's only gonna help. It's gonna make the whole industry more robust moving forward, but we're not quite there yet, so it'll take some time.
It will, and I think we are heading in the right direction. And certainly, this isn't an overnight success that we're going to have. It is something that we need to build upon it, but we need to do it in a safe manner. And I think taking the appropriate steps in that we are right now as an industry, we're doing the right thing for long-term success. And I think this is something that's going to continue to build over the coming years. So I think we're going about it the right way. We don't currently have any questions in there. Again, just to remind people, if they do have any questions, please do put them in the Q&A section. Obviously, Ron is here. Oh, we have a hand up there. Let me see. Is one of the team able to? Hi, there you go. Please go ahead.
Hi, this is Neha Kandra from Region Appeal, looking after PSN. I actually did try to type in a question and answer. It's blocked. It can't seem to get in, and the chat is closed. So that may be one of the issues.
Okay,
I did have a question in regards to the three-party agreement. By doing a three-party agreement, we would then have to do an agreement for every single project. Is that correct? Because not every time, not necessarily you're going to have the same project owner with the same LSP, which then becomes a logistical nightmare for our legal team, and they will not entertain that.
Yeah, so it's a fair point. I guess I'm thinking of this from a perspective that you, because Region Appeal, you'd be more, you have your own projects too. You have your own DLSP or DL projects too.
Yeah, so when I say Region Appeal, I actually look after the fiber network infrastructure. So we do have various different groups within the region, which include traffic, who are their own separate group, and then public works have their separate group. So we are conversing within the organization in terms of process and how we're going to handle things. Some of them are slightly different for each group. We have different needs in that, but we were trying to determine how we would go about the agreements. And I recently had a call with a few of the team members of Ontario One Call in terms of dedicated locate on how to handle the agreement process and what the actual process does look like. And the more we spoke about it, to me, it sort of made sense. If we have, in our case, within the Region Appeal, we would have somewhere between, let's say, 5 and 10 LSPs that would be working within those zones. We would then enter into an agreement with each of those LSPs for the region of Peel. But whenever the DL request came in, it would be project specific, and we would sign off on that. And then it would
Yep.
refer back to the original agreement with each of them. We wouldn't be executing new agreements with each of them.
Yeah. So that's a
sort
fair
of what
point.
I'm
And yeah. So in that situation, you're right. Like if you're already in the position where you've got the agreements set up with the LSPs, then by all means, that's a perfectly good arrangement at that point. I guess I'm thinking more from a large project that's going to be in your area for an entire summer or entire year or whatever it might be. Having that set up and ready to go between all the parties is a good practice. But in your case, yeah, you're such a big region. You've got so many projects. You're already advanced with your contracts with the LSPs. By all means, that makes sense what you're doing there.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So if anyone else has a question, please feel free to raise your hand, and the team will unmute you should you have a question there. And just to reiterate, I know there's some people out there that do see that having that three-party agreement as being more streamlined on their end, but those comments were valid. You know, it's not going to fit for everyone, and I think that's one thing that we've seen and had that feedback is that everyone's having to approach this in a slightly different way because they have different needs, different requirements. Their legal teams view it very differently and what needs to be written down. So I do think that you need to have a look at it from your perspective, but certainly talking to peers in the industry can give you a little bit of headway in what other people are looking at as well. Do we have any other questions? Just going to give it another minute there to see if any other hands go up. But Ron, I'm going to let you kind of finish up if there are no other questions, just to let you know, if you have one piece of advice to leave everyone with, even if it's reiterating one thing from your presentation earlier, what would that be?
I really, it's that last part there. Just understand what you got in place and prepare. Just be ready. That would be the biggest thing from my mind. And I think you can say that about anything in life, but especially in this situation.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. It's something that it's much, again, like a lot of things in life, that nothing will be happening for a long time, and then all of a sudden you're going to get it thick and fast. And certainly I think some of the people on this call would have experienced that already. So yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice for this. Seeing no further hands, I'm going to say thank you very much, Ron. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on today. It was really interesting seeing your presentation, and thanks for making yourself available to everyone on this call. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to everyone else who's attended today. There'll be another webinar set up next month, and you'll be lucky enough to have Marco back for that one. But until then, if you do have any questions for the dedicated Locator team, please do reach out to them, dl@ontariooncall.ca. Or if you have any questions or would like to be connected to Ron, please reach out to the team. They'll be only too happy to pass on his contact information. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope everyone has a wonderful long weekend. Bye-bye now.